Shall we? It's 5 o'clock. Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Wickland. I am the Communications and Community Engagement Director for the City of Hermantown. I'm joined by David Wolf, our city engineer. And today we'll walk you through the first meeting of a pretty significant road project that won't happen until 2024. But this gives us all a chance to begin the discussions. We'll have probably a few more of these meetings and we'll lay out kind of a calendar of events. But you'll get a taste of what David has planned for Hermantown Road from Highway 2 to Ugstad and Old Midway on the section that's Midway on both ends. We'll have time for questions and stuff at the end. We try and keep this pretty informal. This room isn't awesome for that. We've got a few folks online who I know will be patient with them. And while I'm kind of running the tech there at the same time we're doing this meeting. But if you have a question or anything, we'll definitely get it answered, whether it's kind of in this public setting or if you have something you want to ask David or I afterwards. Sound good? So a little bit about today. This slide, you'll see this come up again a little bit, but we're in the very beginning stages of a pretty significant process. And we've done this on our other road improvement projects that will kind of give you a taste of how it's worked since 2020. We've done about one significant road project a summer minus last year, which we'll tell you a little bit about. But know that we're kind of in the early stages involving you guys in the changes that'll happen on your road. A little bit of history on the road improvement plan as a whole. So for the longest time, big significant road projects in Hermantown were only on municipal state aid roads because that was the only way to fund them was through state aid. So most of any kind of fixes on our city streets were done kind of here and there. And in 2015, David will go deeper into this, but we did a citywide inventory on all of our roads, grading them out from kind of worst to best. And David will get into how we split those out, what they look like, and then the type of maintenance or construction plans that exist for each one of those. For us to be able to do any projects like that in Hermantown, we kind of had to change how we did financial management planning or financial planning for the city as a whole. So in 2019, the city council approved the financial management plan, one of the kind of alphabet soup that you'll get used to hearing in these projects are the FMP, the financial management plan. And that really lets our city council plan out big projects over multiple years so they can budget accordingly. Ironically, it's also super helpful if a curveball comes into play that you can deal with that's unexpected on the fly. So in 2019, mapping out the next 10 years was a pretty important and useful idea, but not with any idea that they'd have to scrap the entire project to some degree in 2020 and 2021 because of a global health pandemic. So the initial parts of those projects actually really served the community really, really well out of the blocks. And now in some ways, we're kind of returning to a degree of normalcy in that planning based on the impacts of those years. Multiple surveys. We'll do another one coming up this year. I would wager that it will tell us pretty much the same thing. There's really number one and number 1B issues that kind of are sources of heartburn for our community and roads is usually 1 or 1B on that. As you can see in the last 4 surveys we've done, we can't quite get over the hump of getting 50% of folks to rate our roads good or excellent. And that makes sense when you consider our roads, which makes sense on as to why we've done these particular types of road projects. The other piece, in case you're wondering, is parks that will particularly come up. And that usually has a little bit to do with why we've done what we've done with the Community Recreation Initiative. Separate total presentation on that. But again, if folks have questions about that at the end, I can hang around and ask. At this point, I'll turn it over to David and let him kind of walk through some history on how we got to where we got before we take a look at Hermantown Road.
Thanks, Joe. Again, I'm David Wolf. I'm the Hermantown City Engineer. As I go through my slides and presentation, feel free to raise your hand or stop if you have any questions, if you don't understand the language or terminology of any of the things, just feel free to speak up. So as Joe said, in 2015, I worked with the Public Works Director and we inventoried all the roads in Hermantown. And we put together a spreadsheet and ranked those roads. And those roads were ranked from 1 to 5. A 1 being a road that's a new condition and 5 is a failing road. So the roads in Hermantown, if you can see on the right side of the screen there, there's 164 road segments that were inventoried. And they're broken down into different segments. One being gravel, the next being rural bituminous. And that rural bituminous means there's ditches, there's not curb, gutter, sidewalk, storm sewer. Then the 20 urban sections of bituminous segment, those are the sections that are curb, gutter, some of them have sidewalk and storm sewer. And then the last is the municipal state aid segments. And those are the larger volume roads that we're draw our state aid dollars for. An example of those would be Stebner Road, Ugsted, parts of Lindahl, Hermantown Road, some of our larger volume roads. And these are not to be confused with the county roads like Maple Grove, Morris Thomas, Haynes Road, and Midway. So as we looked at the ranking of each of these roads, we looked at what method could we use to restore these roads, enhance the longevity of these roads, or if they're so far gone that you have to reconstruct them. So with that, you know, so as we move forward in our road, excuse me, our road improvement plan, we were really focused on the roads that were 3, 4, and 5, which are the roads that have failed or are getting close to failing. And there's different improvement strategies that we can implement for each of those different rankings of roads. So from the going in order from ranking 3, 4, and 5, we have these different strategies. And mill and overlay would be an improvement strategy that we would implement for a road that was ranked a 3, and that would be a mill and overlay. So mill and overlay is they grind up the blacktop, they put it in a truck, and they remove it, and then they repave it. That's what the county's going to be doing on Haynes Road this year. A reclaim and overlay. So let me back up. The Hermantown Road and Old Midway were ranked 4 and 5, depending on the segments that we're looking at. So as we put together a feasibility study and we are looking at the improvement strategies, there's 2 different improvement strategies that we're planning to implement on these sections of road. One is a reclaim and overlay, and a reclaim and overlay is where they grind the blacktop up with the underlying base. We spread it out, compact it, then we bring in more class 5 and pave it, and we do some ditch work and new driveway culverts. A full reconstruction is where the pavement is shot, the subgrade is shot, and we go and we excavate down 2 feet, remove all that bad material, and build a complete brand new road. So our estimates right now is about 25% or 1 mile of Hermantown Road and Old Midway will have full reconstruction. The remaining 3 miles will be a reclaim and overlay. And as we get into the design, that will change, but that's what we're estimating right now.
There's the magic key.
Okay. So, okay. The Hermantown has 2 road standards, a rural road standard and an urban. And the difference between those standards are the rural has shoulders, ditches, driveway culverts. Typically, we don't have the utilities, water and sewer. And then the urban standard is where we have curb and gutter, sidewalk, storm sewer. So those are the kind of the different, the 2 different standards we have. And depending where we are in the city and the proximity to other utilities is how we determine the standard that we're going to apply. So on this project, This is more of a rural setting. We don't have water and sewer. So we are proposing to apply the rural standard. So similar to what out there now, a little wider, smoother, and then we'll, fix the underlying base. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Joe. Thank you.
Let me let a few folks in who arrived late. So I talked a little bit before, David, about the financial management plan that kind of allows us to do projects of this size and all the other projects we do across the entire city year over year and budget appropriately. For the longest time, I wouldn't say we went year to year or fought fires as they came, but we weren't designed financially to be able to manage large projects that could be linked together over multiple years the way that Hermantown did budgeting before 2019. So this plan particularly allows us to leverage existing debts and future debts, big time capital improvement plans, things like this building, the wellness center, the community recreation initiative pieces that are coming into play after the vote, allows us to leverage future growth rather than wait for it to appear before we can make amenities changes. And then most importantly, it allows us to not only know what we're going to do year to year, but like I mentioned, if something comes up that's catastrophic, which usually we just talked about challenging before, but it allows us to pivot in a way that during the pandemic, we were able to still do everything that we needed to do as a city without any kind of massive handoff to taxpayers or any massive cuts in resources because we had this particular plan to do this out. We bring this up because obviously these road projects, kind of some of the things that David mentioned, like 1.5 million for and more now for doing a mile of full reconstruction isn't something that is just going to get covered with traditional tax dollars. So projects like this have a couple of different ways they can get paid and a couple of ways they can't. So it's always really helpful to know what buckets of money and different things can go into this. We'll talk about assessments soon, which certainly is part of the reason why everyone's here. It's certainly the most fun part of the road improvement projects for us to talk about. The general tax levy, so this road project and other road projects are funded by everyone who uses the road, not just the residents. Municipal state aid allocation, like David mentioned, those are a specific set of roads that we can tap into some of that for. Local government aid is something that our peers, Duluth, Proctor, and the Iron Range receive significant funding from the state on, and the city of Hermantown receives $0. If you're plugged into the legislature, that might change. Both Representative Zalesnikar and Senator Housechild have worked hard to potentially make some changes where Hermantown would receive local government aid. But at this point, that's a $0 amount, so we can't access that. Sales tax is something that often comes up in these meetings simply because we've done a good job of leveraging that on different projects over the last few years. Things like the trunk sewer down section 24, where you can see the trail, water upgrades, City Hall, the wellness center, and then as you'll see coming online in the next year plus, the creation of the additional indoor sheet of ice, the reimagining of Fickner Park is more of a central park available for all, and then the extensions and completions of the trail. So sales tax can't be pulled into a road project. It can only be used for those particular things. We've got 4 utilities in Hermantown. Sometimes people aren't aware that we actually have 4. The water utilities, so if there's water upgrades or system maintenance like that, that can be tapped into. Stormwater utility fund, which is a fairly recent utility. That's the $7 a month that folks see on their bill if they have city water, or the 2 times a year, $42 bill that you get if you're on septic or not on city water. Those can be used in this case when we make upgrades to the stormwater system, the ditches, the culverts, the bridges, all the different things that move stormwater appropriately through our city, and everybody uses and everybody benefits from. Sanitary sewer and street lights, those are again specific for those types of things. So there'll be a couple of different things that we can access here for funding this type of project, but as you can see, there's certainly some things we can't access when we fund a road. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of how this feels at the individual level. Across the last 4 years, when we've done these road improvement projects, we have proposed assessments to the homeowners that are and landowners that are bordering those properties at $9,750. All right, we worked very hard on the beginning part of this process to keep that number under 10,000 because we felt like that was slightly more palatable, but that number can be big. I'll talk about how it gets paid as we go on, but there's really 2 ways that you'll experience this. One, we won't do any assessments until the project's complete. So you're at least not paying for construction, you're paying for the product at the end. Most folks will push it onto their property taxes. You'll see that happen once a year. It'll be spread out over 15 years. The city's able to finance right now at 5.5%. So your annual payment is $971.35. Give or take a penny on each side, depending on how it shakes out. So that's the type of piece, if you say, hey, I don't have $9,750 when it comes assessment time. That doesn't mean that you have to turn around and write a check for that. It can be rolled onto your property taxes and be part of that bill. We do have folks who come in traditionally November, December after the project is complete and write a check for $9,750 if they prefer. There's a degree of savings in there because you're not taking out the loan, so to speak, to spread that payment out over 15 years. But that's so you can start to kind of feel the real numbers of this at the individual level. And that, like we said at the beginning, that's road assessment is a part of what makes it possible to be able to do a project of this magnitude. So what, yep, go ahead.
So that $9,750 assessed to anybody who voted it worked on, regardless if it's a full reconstruction, water, sewer, sidewalk, or not, we still return the same.
Yep. So the question for the folks online is that number constant regardless of the project for these types of road projects? This is always 9750. And thus far, yes, that's been the case. So on the slide in front of you now, the previous iterations of this, we started this in 2020 where we did kind of the neighborhood in the southwest corner, southeast corner of Hermantown with Johnson, Portland, Carlson, Alexander, and those kind of series of roads. And every property owner in that received an assessment for $9,750. 2021, we redid Levake Junction, which despite some artists in your neighborhoods paint job that they did on the road when I first got hired, the folks at Levake Junction thought their road was worse. And they felt like that was the worst road in Hermantown. I think you guys have a pretty compelling argument that you might have the worst road in Hermantown. But those folks got a different type of project than Johnson, Portland, Carlson, Alexander. Not to a great degree, but some. $9,750 for each resident there. There's a few roads out by the airport, Swan Lake and Sunby, where we redid some of that. Some of those are county roads, so there was properties on that didn't. The ones that were on ours did get the $9,750. In 22/23, you'll see up there, we'll do Ugstad Road from Highway 53 all the way to the ballpark on Maple Grove. $9,750 proposed assessment for each one of those properties. And then we come to your guys' work here. The logic behind that, there's kind of two ways you can do assessments. Our neighbors to the south and downhill do it on square footage. And that's linear footage, excuse me. That's not a particularly appealing way for us to do it because that's, you know,
Especially in this.
yeah, where you've got large parcels that there doesn't feel like a lot of equity in the project. So we've decided to go at the front end of all these projects of keeping that assessment the same because inevitably these projects not only improve the value of the road and the houses in that area, but really a lot of folks who aren't just y'all use those roads. And so this way that's a degree of equity and we're all in it together. And then, as I noted earlier, let me see back, general tax levy, which you'll see does factor into these roads as well. So it's not just, you know, the residents paying for it. It's a little bit of everybody.
And I have one more thing to add to your question. In regards to the 9750 assessment, that's for the road portion only. If the neighborhood filed a petition to extend water and sewer, that would be an assessment above and beyond the 9750 for a road. So this is for road only, not utilities. I just wanted to make that kind of clear.
Jonathan.
So just to think that out, is it fair to say, based on all projects we're looking at this, every single project to date, that's the water?
No, I don't think they have city water and sewer out on Swan Lake and Sunby.
Correct.
So no.
Which
Swan Lake and Sunby.
Over by the jail on Haynes Road.
No. And future iterations won't all have city sewer and water in here either.
So we're working on Lindahl Road, north of Highway 53, the same.
It's interesting. I know on Anderson, on the Duluth side, they do, and it's, you know, at least a comparable road because it's it's on the other side of the hill, and they do it again, Duluth on the lineal footage. So those assessments for those road improvements were there. So it's not very unique to Hermantown in terms of that, to the degree at which it's unique for folks who don't have water and sewer. I couldn't speak to, but very similar projects to what we've seen in Duluth.
There's another question.
Yep. Per parcel.
And is that only one parcel or?
Super good question. So the question for folks online is, you know, is it define who gets the 9750 per parcel and is it accessible? I'll use the example on Lake Junction. There we had one parcel owner. The way it was designed is that their driveway was on an easement, and the only way that they could leave their home was Lake Junction. And so the assessment was appropriate there. We've worked with folks on all of these projects, but Johnson and Carlson was maybe the perfect example where, hey, I've got one lot that I live on and I've got a second unbuildable lot or a portion of land that's unbuildable. We'll work with you to do a couple different things because the goal isn't 9750 on every part and parcel. It's 9750 on every place that truly benefits from it. So whether we're talking about a lot combination or in the past, we've drawn stuff up about should building end up on this, then it would be appropriate then for the 9750 to be a part of it. Kind of like an availability fee, then that can be part of the equation. So if you're in a spot where you own 2 lots and 2 homes and true parcels, then yes. Okay. One parcel.
So let's be clear. The parcels are defined by the county, and there's a GIS database, and each parcel of land has a PID, parcel identification number, and that's how we prepare the assessment roll is based on those parcel IDs. So an example of a past project is we had one owner that had 3 lots, 3 different parcel identification numbers. So per our assessment, per the state statutes in our assessment, we could have assessed 9750 on all 3 parcels. We worked with them and we combined those 3 parcels into one parcel, one assessment for 9750. So there's unique scenarios, and we're willing to work with, you know, the property owners to do what's, you know, best for your individual circumstance. Yes. Yep. We'll what's your address?
So in your case, and the question again at home is exactly what we're talking about, unique situations of ownership of potentially multiple parcels or whatnot. So we would sit down with you one-on-one and say, all right, this is what makes sense for your particular property. Because that, in that case, whether it makes sense for it to be 3, 2, or 1, we just want to take a look at it. At this point, early in the game, what's really important is we want to open up dialogue, because that's going to be a conversation with me and David as your touch points to help figure that out. If one assessment is appropriate. And in most cases that we've been able to work to that, that's the goal. But there are folks, like I said, who, hey, we own our parents' property right next door. Well, that's, yep. And so we really want that to be on a case by case basis so we can get to know you. So that's one of the biggest pieces that we come out of, especially in the early meetings. And again, a reminder that this project is slated for 2024. So we have a ton of time to get to know each other on these parcels and pieces of property, is to be able to understand how you use them and how they operate in real life versus not. The example we always use again with over on Johnson, Portland, Carlson was 3 properties that made sense to turn into one. But there was definitely a resident on Swan Lake who had 2 separate parcels that were adjacent to each other that were used for 2 separate things. And it made sense for that to be 2 separate assessments. So case by case. So I won't be able to, we won't answer that on the fly for you now, but if you hang around afterwards, we can take a look on the GIS. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions about this? Gotcha. Yeah, initial reaction to that is probably no, but let's see that afterwards. Not likely going to build a bunch of stuff in that 50 feet, right? Yeah. Yeah. So for all of those, definitely folks online and definitely your neighbors who aren't here, because we know we've got a good crowd, which is great, but not everybody's here. If there's a one-on-one my property question or my situation, absolutely come and connect with David and I again at the end of this meeting or as we go. Because here's a perfect example. You two are in totally different situations. And what's your address? Any other questions before we kick into some specificity about your guys' project? Again, I showed you at the beginning that slide. This is really the roadmap to our roadmap. So this is kind of the order in which things will happen so that you know that you have multiple opportunities to be a part of this process, to talk about what works, what doesn't work, to we'll guide you to where we talk about the assessments in terms of even having individual hearings on those. But today, as you can see in the circles, April 6th, 2023, our first public information meeting, either at the end of April, the next April meeting, or the first meeting in May. We'll have a public hearing before one of our city council meetings about selecting a consultant, authorizing plans and specs. All of those particular meetings are first and third Mondays with a few exceptions for holidays. All of the agendas for those are posted online the Wednesday before. You can also always call me and say, hey, is there anything related to this project on the menu for the next meeting? So that's a perfect example of, we're not quite sure if that's the next meeting or the one after, but that one will be in. We'll have a second public information meeting for this project at the 30% plan. That'll be at some point this summer when David has those planned out at the 30% level to be able to get you guys a picture of what is happening on the road, kind of right in front of your property type thing, as well as what we're doing as a whole. December of 23, it'll be approved for plans and specs. All the way into February of 24. That's where the project bids will be reviewed. And then you can kind of see the construction schedule into 2024. David and I and the eventually chosen contractor will do almost for sure weekly meetings on site once the project starts. So you'll be able to know, hey, this is what it looks like, this week, here's what's happening. It also gives folks a chance to say, gosh, if you could remind the dump truck drivers to slow down. Hey, it's particularly dusty. Can you hit this with the water truck again? Gosh, this is actually where the water drains, even though it looks like you think. All of those are super good pieces of advice and information for us to get, and you'll have a weekly chance to weigh in on those somewhere on site. Obviously, a long ways out in 2024, but that's what that'll look like. David and I will be all up and down Uggstead Road for those in 2023. Yeah.
Let me add one thing here first is I just want to, I've been doing these assess projects since 1997, even though we haven't had a road improvement plan that long. I've been involved in a lot of utility projects that have been assessed. And I want to just re-emphasize that the purposes of the meeting is to get the information out there to everybody here. This is a public information meeting. The next time you see us, it'll be at a public hearing. And that's when you'll have an opportunity to talk to the counselors in favor or against the project. And the city council has the ultimate authority. They're going to be directing me as a city engineer either to prepare the plans and specifications or the project is dead. So we're just kind of getting the message out, what the project is and how the mechanics of the project works. So there's no voting and no decision-making here tonight. So with that, I think we had a question in the back.
Usually don't have people for sidewalks. So the question for folks online is, is there any thought into putting sidewalk on Old Midway, because there is a little bit around the roundabout? And the short answer is, at this point, it's not part of the plan. Again, traditionally, that means sidewalk doesn't usually come these days without curb, gutter, and that upgrade to a urban section, which is a pretty considerable change on the road and a pretty considerable cost. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but currently isn't part of the plan. Question is there going to be any work done bridge over Midway River? I'll let David handle that one.
Good question. We're going to talk about that later in the presentation, but brought it up. Yes. So the city of Hermantown last year hired LHB, a consulting engineer, to design us a new bridge. We were hoping to get some bridge bonding in order to replace that bridge this year, but the bonding money was not available. So we are hopeful that the bridge bonding dollars will be available for next year. So the plan right now is, yes, we are going to replace that bridge on Hermantown Road, in the vicinities of five corners road there. So that's our plan. There's box culverts there now. We're going to remove the box culverts, put a real bridge in there, raise the grade a little bit. And so Hermantown Road will be closed when we put the bridge in. And when we know when it's going to be done, we will communicate that. At the earliest, it would probably be June 1st of 2024. Yes.
Ideally.
Yep.
Like David said, originally our hope was to do that even this year. But some of that is a different part of money that we hope to access to be able to fund that portion of the project.
So we have a couple of constraints. One is the funding, and because it's a trout stream, we have June 1st to September 1st. That's the time frame to do the work on the bridge. Yes, back here. Well,
you mentioned that we know that the $100 would become just the water. Do we have estimates? If we were to sidewalks there, or spaces, it's the water. Do we have cost estimation on the experience, how much that?
So there's multiple questions there. I'll try to recap it and answer them. So the question is there an opportunity to put sidewalks or build an urban section with curb gutter? The short answer is yes. The long answer is it would be a recommendation that would have to come from me and the public works director and the city administrator to the city council saying, we think that the urban section is a good fit for this neighborhood. And I'm not there right now. And the second part of your question is the utilities. We don't have any utilities that are close right now. I think the water is on Ugsted and Hermantown, and there's a low pressure sewer in that area as well. So that would be a very big system upgrade to get water and sewer out that far. And it all comes down to dollars. And so have we done a cost? I know what a cost per foot for water, sewer, and a rural section. So something like this would probably be about $1,000 a foot if you had curb, gutter, sidewalk, and utilities. So you have 22,000 feet of road. That's 22 million. So I mean, the assessment would just scratch the surface of a project of that magnitude. No. So $1,000 a foot is about 5.2 million a mile. Yep. So, yes. Good question, and I don't have an answer right now. So we will reach out to the traffic engineer from MnDOT, and I would like to provide an answer at our public hearing in regards to that, because I don't know when that's going to take place, and I don't know if there's a geometry change. I know that I would support a right angle to clean that up, and yeah.
And the question for folks online was the way that Hermantown Road interacts with US Highway 2 and some of the potential planned work on there. Can there be a conjunction that would change how those two roads interact, make it a little bit safer? i.e. like we saw the county, or like we saw done on US Highway 2 and Morris Thomas. And the answer, like David said, is that'll be a quick phone call. We can track that down and line up those schedules to see if that's part of their plan, when that's part of their plan, and if it can factor into this. Want to jump into the project?
Okay. So we've talked a lot about the history of the road improvement and the financial management plan. We really haven't talked any specifics about the project that we're proposing. So it's 4 miles of road rehabilitation or reconstruction, depending on what we find during our survey and our geotechnical evaluation. So the segments there's 2 segments. There's Hermantown Road from Highway 2 east 3 miles to Ugsted Road. And then there's the 1 mile section of Old Midway from Midway to Midway. So those are the 2 segments of the project. So hopefully you're in the right room. So this next slide here is a snapshot for each one of these assessed projects. We have a state statute set of rules that we have to follow. And one of the first pieces of the rule is we have to prepare a feasibility study. And the feasibility study it's a high level, low detail discussion and presentation on the improvements that we're proposing, why we're proposing it, and then the costs associated with that. So on the left-hand side of the screen is what we call an engineer's estimate. It's an estimate of what we feel the costs are going to be. And if you go to the bottom, it's $4.3 million. And then on the, okay, so then on the right-hand side is just a blow up of how we got to that 4.3 million. So there's about 3.4 million of its construction costs, and then there's contingency, engineering, testing, geotech evaluation, There may be some wetland permitting. We may have some easement acquisitions and some legal work associated with that as well. So again, here is the $4.3 million estimated construction costs. The table on the bottom, if we look back to what Joe had presented on the funding sources that we have available, on this project, we have 3 funding sources that are available. Our stormwater utility fund, which we can apply those dollars for ditching and driveway culverts. If we had a bridge on this section, we could use it. Curb gutter and storm sewer is also eligible, but it's not part of this. Assessments, we have counted 111 parcels that we feel are can be assessed, and times that by 9,750 is just over $1 million. And then the general levy takes the bulk of the funding on this. So as you can see, the assessment is just under 25% of the cost of the project. And that has, on the previous projects, it's fallen in right in that 20 to 25% range of the assessed portion of the total project. Are there any questions on that? Okay. So this is which is what I'm showing here, what we call cross sections, and that's like taking a slice of the road vertically. And what we have here on the top is the I'm just trying to see what I got here. Okay, so we have 2 different sections here. So the top section is what we would do on most of the project, where we're calling it a reclaim and overlay, where we grind up the pavement, we put some class 5 down on top of it, we recut ditches, do driveway culverts, repave it, new shoulders. And then the bottom one is in those areas where the paint is on the road. We'll go down and get that a little bit deeper. We have a 2-foot subcut and rebuild that in new construction. So that has sand, class 5, and then blacktop and new shouldering. So those are the 2 different cross sections, as we call it. That, well, I don't know that yet. So once we have a survey, so what we did is we estimated 3/4 of it is reclaim and overlay, and 25% is pulled up reconstruction. So once we have our survey and get our geotechnical report and we get our 30% plans, we'll fine tune that estimate based on our findings. So I don't, it could be higher, it could be lower than that. Okay, I think you were first.
First of all, please give your own.
Yep, actually, they'll all be that after this presentation, probably not right after it, but tomorrow. I'll post all these slides on that website, hermantown.com/rules.
It's not a slide we talked about. Reclaim.
Yeah.
That's not a slide. It's
Yeah.
I'm doing the math, it's really simple.
Well, if we go, okay, so here, this table on,
Just do a really simple. 1.5 miles.
So-
Mile. Red tape, besides. 4.3 million. That's a pretty. Oh,
Yeah.
So that's 1.5. Basically, got it. In and out.
So,
That's for it.
No, I think that that's a good question for now, and it's, in some ways, Jonathan, I would say it's outlined right there for you. So the gap you're talking about is essentially $400,000. That's all, which is significant.
it's about
So
a
you said
million.
it's about $1 million to 4, because you added up and it's 3. Is
Based
that,
on what you just said.
yeah, and David's saying, just to hedge our bet, 3.4, and the remainder is in construction costs such as contingency, design, engineering, construction, that would carry that up there. If we're in a spot where we can make it less, we certainly will. That's not an issue at all.
And the
So-
reality is that it costs a lot more than
Totally.
a mile. That's why we should change.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
so we're in, and that's kind of to provide a high overview. We're talking about 3 significant different levels of project and kind of a generic way to start to think about it. But when we get this up online, again, this isn't meant to be a great graphic you can read. It's meant to be like David's put in a staggering amount of work to figure out where those dollars and cents are at a preliminary stage that ideally, and even he knows, we'll try and drive down as we go through that process. But this will help you outline, at least in and around where every expected dollar is going to go. Then when we get to that 30% phase, David will be able to say, now that we've dug in the dirt and seen the road, yeah, it is 75% that's one way, or it's 72%, or it's these miles, and then this is a bad stretch and that. As we get into 2023, we'll do that type of thing.
So, and I'll add this, like I said previously, I've been part of these assessed projects since '97 for the city of Hermantown. And we have seen probably from the low 20s to mid 35% of the cost of the project is what I would call administration, between engineering, geotech, staff time, legal time, wetlands, easement. So there is a significant portion of it that's not construction related. The federal aid project that we have right over here this year, that percent is a lot higher because it costs a lot more money to manage and meet the federal aid standards than this project, which is all local dollars. So, I mean, it's a good question, and it's hard to accept and understand the answer, but that's why it's like that. Yeah, we have a question here. Yes.
Full Midway.
So are you talking at the?
Midway lumber and floor.
Well, right now that's what the council has asked us to look at. So yes, that's part of the project.
That may be the. I don't know one part. Maybe I don't know.
Well, there's 4, I'm looking at it, there's 5. There's 5 parcels. There's 3 on the west side and there's 2 on the east side. Good question. Hopefully we'll have an answer at the public hearing for that. And the reason we don't have an answer for you is up until this point, all of the road improvement projects have been residential only. We have not had a commercial property. So we are aware that we need to address that, but we don't have an answer for it right now. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, there's a few differences that are under consideration, and we need a little guidance from our elected officials on that.
No. I mean, not according to the map there.
Other questions? And again, to Jonathan's question, I saw some of you taking pictures, which is great, but I will have, barring another snowstorm, I'll be at work tomorrow and this will be up at some point on that website tomorrow at the latest. So
I would add, you asked the question about, is this available? And the feasibility study is a public document. It was, went to council. No, it was to
March, the second one in March.
second meeting in March. So that's in the minutes. The full report is included in the minutes there. So if you're so inclined, you can find it there. Yes. Good question. So the question is, what's the
Same.
so the question is, what's the life expectancy of the road and what insurance do we have that it's not going to look like it does in 5 years? The life expectancy on these are somewhere between 20 and 25 years. And as long as I've been involved in Hermantown, I can't recall anything ever being done on this section of Hermantown Road. So I'm guessing it was probably sometime in the 70s. 89. So
Just later.
Yep. Later.
2 years later,
They went down on the
look
grade,
at this now.
created it, one end and the other. I think it went to the radiator. Created it, and then they came back,
For the quarter, that the gas things, all along for the.
How did they make it 2 years?
So the other part of your question is how the insurance that it's going to not look like this in 5 years. And all I can say to that is been designing roads for quite a while in this climate in this region. And I've never seen one fall apart in 5 years that we've rebuilt.
only after about 4 years.
That's like shorter.
Oh, so you're talking Hermantown Road, but yes. So good question. So those are utility trenches. So it's either a water or sewer service that goes to the individual homes. And why that moves differently than the rest of the road is when you put in the utility, typically sand goes back in that trench. It gets compacted to 100%, but you have virgin material and then you have sand where the trench is. And that sand moves differently than the rest of the road. So this time of year, it's highlighted and there's a couple of cross culverts. This time of year is the worst time to drive it. It's the best time to be made aware of the deficiencies, sure.
So we shouldn't see that on Hermantown Midway because there's no utility.
Right. I mean, we'll have some, when I say center line culverts, those are the culverts that cross the road perpendicular. And we have a method or a detail that we apply, and it's called a culvert treatment. And what we do instead of digging a vertical trench across the road is we do a taper. So instead of having a real hard sudden thud, it'll be more of a lull. Yeah, I mean, right. And when we present these projects and we want to be clear that these are improvement projects. It's not a cure all. It's not, you're not going to have a perfect road. It's an improvement. If the only way it's going to be perfect is if we had money to build like a railroad ballast where you have 7 or 8 feet of rock that it's free draining and you'll never have any frost moving it. That's the only true way to have yeah.
The assessment might have to change a bit.
Yeah.
We're gonna build it like they do on the runway at the airport.
How long is it gonna last? And it's only gonna last 10 years. Why? You know, it's
The other question is, you're saying that bridge we might not have the funding. So then we're gonna do the road, and the bridge funding comes later, then we can rip up the road and do construction, kind of like we did on the Hudspeth Road here with the city sewer and all that. We got all these fit. Why don't we, if we're gonna put city sewer in and city water, we do that first. We have to put up this road the way it is for another 3 years, because 3 years from now, you're gonna put that in. There ain't no supposed to do a road, it's like doing it. Then we got to pay again, we check that. So
So
we
there's a
should
couple
do the things first, right? If there ain't gonna be city water and sewer, that's fine.
Yeah.
Then the bridge issue. Before you start any project, that you're gonna have to go back and tear up the road to finish it. Not like you've done in other places. And who's gonna inspect it? State inspector?
The bridge or the,
Bridge, the road.
my office?
I drive truck.
No.
We did Maple Grove. We did places in Spokane. We're all. All right. They tell us to stay away from curb job right down here on Maple Grove. Stay away from there. It's the low spot. Well, what are you doing? Why are you letting them do it? Not saying that's not your accessible.
Yeah.
But no, keep your trucks farther away, put extra chute on. And get it over so you're not riding there so cracked. Well, everywhere that was a flat spot is where the road's cracked over the curb spot. So why is our state inspector letting stuff go? I mean, well, we get a big rain in the middle of the project, we also need a big hole here, mud puddle. We got to stay away with it with big trucks. But we'll put the concrete there for a sidewalk, knowing that it's still there. Why don't they stop the project, refix it?
Well, okay, I'm not gonna try to answer what happened on a county project. What I will tell you is, as a city engineer, the next on the 17th, we're gonna have a public hearing, and if that's favorable and they decide to move forward with the project, next thing on the agenda is a contract to hire me as a city engineer to do the design engineering and the construction engineering. The construction engineering is, I have an inspector that's out on the job near full time, that's seeing everything that goes down. We have a testing company that tests the sand, the class 5, and the bituminous. There's likely not going to be any concrete on this project. So there are checks and balances. And at the end of the job, I have to certify to the city council that the contractor built the project according to the plans and specifications that I prepared. So, I mean,
I understand what you're saying, but sometimes it's just all of a sudden it's not, it's not coming.
That's a very good question. And I'll give the example, the scenario that played out on Ungstead Road, or excuse me, Lubbock Junction 2 years ago. We were excavating it and the dump trucks were getting stuck. We had ruts this deep. And it's like, what do we do? So time out. I got the geotech engineer out there. We collectively decided that we need to go down deeper, take that muck out and bring sand in. So it's up to me and my inspector and the geotech engineer to make, we're the eyes and ears, representing the city and make sure your assessed dollars or you're getting the product that we're, selling or telling you that we're going to provide. So, and then part of that life expectancy of the road is maintenance. So we've been working with the Public Works Department also to do chip seal and crack seal on specific projects to extend the life of these roads. So. I'm the city engineer, not the public works director.
So let me ask that. A little bit of,
It's gonna snow. We'll get it filled in.
I was gonna say, we're making those arrangements. And I was also gonna joke, if, if whoever is I'm still waiting for the admission of the resident artist from 2019 who helped us out by pointing out, we didn't know those potholes were there until somebody pointed them out. Yeah, that was a big help. Yeah, if there's a major fix that needs to be done in the interim, yeah, it'll be done like it always is. But that's different than road reconstruction. Well, it will be done. Yeah. To the degree at which you've experienced this road, we're not going to do nothing for a year. We're going to do what we've done.
Actually, one thing the crew combined, they only stick. There's one. Those guys, they were more like this on their home than filling the hole. They're you know.
They were filling in the painted ones.
Should have painted them. We'll pass that along to Public Works.
This is we know that there's gonna be 111.
That just so you guys know, I will bet the over that there will be 100, way more than 111. Because you'll have everybody on roads we've done come up and see if we've done a better job on your road than theirs.
My family's been on that road in the 50s. The only thing that was ever done was the 1989 North down. We definitely want to see.
Question in the back. Yes.
I don't know off the top of my head, but
No, we've got people going down there.
so are you sure you want us to fix this?
You better put off the signs because you get to the top of the hill, there's beyond the from most of it. I'm a half a mile away from here. I can't make the window and there's cars.
There's a house.
So they're doing 67.
To put that every road will be a little bit different, but we'll use Levake as the example, but it's a very different road. But on that particular road, obviously, as soon as a new road does tend to drive faster than an old road. Well, at the end of each and every one of these projects, we've done a little bit of increased police presence. We've done signage in spots that make sense. Off the top of my head, my guess is that the miles per hour isn't about to change, but there might be some signage differences to kind of draw that in. But if folks are driving, let's be honest about how this works. If folks are driving at 60 on it in this condition, and we will tell you that we'll smile about this, but oftentimes there's one or two of the suspects in the room when we talk about this, because as much as that road is a pass through, some of your 60-mile-an-hourers are your neighbors. And so that's often that nice chance to reset and say, if collectively, if we and y'all do think speed is an issue, we're about to make a nicer road, and at least the folks who use it regularly commit to use it at the speed limit, that would be a really big deterrent for other folks. But if our neighborhood is using it at 60, then it's even tougher for the occasional.
So
to manage that.
I'm gonna piggyback what Joe said. So let's assume the posted speed limit is 40 miles an hour. So from an engineering standpoint, I have to, when I design the road, I have guidelines that I have to design the road to. And there's no real horizontal curves, meaning left or right is pretty straight. So the only thing would be the vertical curve, the up and downs. So we would design this, let's say it's 40 miles an hour. So on my plans, I would say the design speed is 40 miles an hour, and I would recommend posting it at 40. If there's a strong feeling from the neighborhood, the community, that speed limit should be adjusted up or down, what would happen is between myself and the police chief, we would have to study this and make a recommendation to the city council to change the speed limit. And there would have to be some compelling factors in order for us to go down that path. You know, right. I mean, an example would be, multiple accidents, multiple speeding tickets, blind spots. And if that doesn't exist, it would be hard for us to justify changing it up or down. So does that answer your question? Okay, I think we had one right. Go to the cabin for 3 months. No, but seriously, we've done this many times, this routine of, and it's, your properties here are easier than some of the other projects where they're dead end roads. Those are the hard ones that we have to deal with. So when we sit down with the contractor, we will let them know that the expectation is the end of every construction day, residents should be able to get in their driveway. That doesn't mean during the course of the workday that you'll be able to come and go freely. We've also had scenarios where we've had wedding events, grad parties, and if we know that's going to happen ahead of time, we can, you know, accommodate you the best we can. The good thing about this project is we don't have any deep utilities. We're not going to be digging 8-10 feet down anywhere, put a pipe in the ground. We're working in the upper 2 or 3 feet with ditches and the road. So the there's going to be some inconveniences, but it's not going to be, we're not going to block you out of your house or driveway for a week at a time. So, I mean, that's the best. Yeah. And these projects have a way of neighbors getting to know neighbors better than they do. People have parked their cars or boats or campers in people's yards that aren't being worked on or affected at the time. So we've addressed all kinds of issues out there, whether it's an accessibility issue or, you know, need to get a camper, like I said, or a boat. There's a lot of things that we've come across, and we'll address them.
And a good way to think about that is those weekly meetings that, you know, when I look outside and see that it's January 128th out there and we're still dealing with snow and we're talking about a project in the sun and warm of, you know, June, July of 2024. Those weekly meetings are super helpful because it's not just David and I availability and the contractor, but your neighbors are there too. And then that website where this will be posted and where this meeting will be posted and all that, there's a running tally of all kinds of different things that are kind of coming up as we go. So if there's a particular, you know, project like, hey, weather delayed us a little bit, we're going to work a little bit later, this will be a busy weekend for work, everyone is kind of in the loop on that. Or if things are ahead of schedule and that allows for a different set of planning, there's a lot of regular communication, which starts, that's part of why we have this meeting so far on the front end.
Okay, I just want to say, I agree with you that Old Midway Road is a number 5, been that way for 30 years. One thing that's good about it, traffic is very small. Only traffic is the people that live on it. What would happen? I know there's one project. What would happen? What would the people that live on it?
You bring that to the council's attention on the public hearing.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yep, that would be great. I mean, this is definitely one thing, the way David and I are thinking about it now, but it doesn't have to be. And again, part of this process for us is also for us to start to get to know y'all. And again, the ideas of what's possible, sidewalks, don't do the project. all that. This is a great starting point to start to share those things and to talk about it as neighbors. And then again, it can be in one of these environments, it can be a public hearing, you can get a hold of me at any point. David and I end up kind of running to these projects quite a bit outside of the regular meetings. So it's a great question and a great starting point to talk about it with your neighbors.
I have something that they.
Yes. So the question is, for those online, are we gonna be replacing the driveway culverts? And yes, that is across the board, we're gonna replace the driveway culvert. There's a couple other things that detailed we haven't talked about yet, but one is driveway culverts, planning to replace all those, likely ditching along all 4 miles, both sides. That's likely what's gonna happen. Everybody will get a new mailbox. Everybody's gonna get a new fire number. Yes. So you're something old Midway and there's a same number Midway? That's not a city of Hermantown issue. It's a postmaster issue. Yeah.
But that being said, this comes up during the discussions and we had this in other roads. So it's not a bad time to bring it up with the postmaster and then we can at least be a part of the discussion.
Good. Yes.
I was assuming that the public. They're going back to whatever they have today.
Yes.
The some of us. Just do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, when we dig into the driveways, are we going to restore it to what's there today? And the answer is yes. If you have a gravel class 5 driveway, we're putting that back. If you have concrete, it's getting concrete. If it's pavers, we're putting the pavers back in. If it's blacktop, we're putting the blacktop in. And then we have a minimum standard. I think it's 12 feet wide. So if you have a 8-foot driveway at the right of way, we're going to make it 12 feet and then we'll narrow it down. We'll match the width.
Get out there today.
So I gotta get up to 30 first.
Get a good relationship with the contractor.
Just wondering, are you the exact same equipment or what is it now?
Until so the question is the road gonna be the same width as it is today? And nominally it's gonna be wider. And I don't know the specific answers until we get our survey done, because there's for the most part, it's about the same width, but our standard is 24 feet of blacktop. So 2 12-foot lanes and then 2-foot gravel shoulders. So from shoulder to shoulder, it would be 28 feet wide.
And then the ditch side,
So the ditches, let's see here. So it's hard to see, but on the bottom right, you'll see the ditch. So once you get to the edge of the shoulder, we go down at a 3-to-1 slope and go 3 feet deep, and we have a 2-foot ditch bottom and then back up. So, and if you, once this, yeah, as long as, well, that's good point. And yes, and maybe. So as we get further into this design, that's one of the things that we'll look at. And what is hard as this may seem to absorb. Well, so let's be clear. The city has a 66-foot right of way. So if a tree was in that 66 feet, it's technically the city's. So anything beyond that is on private property, which would be considered,
You don't know.
No, we own the road, we don't own the frontage, but I know why you sat in the front now. Pardon me? No. Yes, yeah, so yeah, yeah, so that detail will come in the 30 to 50% design phase of the project. And one of the prior screens, you saw a line item in there for easement. So there may be an instance where we need to go wider than the 66 feet to get our ditch and culvert in there. And if you're saying your ditch is a lot wider than that, that might be one of the scenarios where we're gonna say, well, to make this improvement, we're gonna have to get another 10 or 20 feet of right of way in order to do that work. So. Yes. Lowest responsible bidder. So what does that mean? They cannot be on the debarred list. They have to have good standing. If an example would be if we are we had an unsuccessful project and we had to take legal action against a contractor, we probably wouldn't be too excited to enter into another agreement with them. So. But we don't, good questions. The question is, how many bids do we get? And we just opened a bid last week for Richard Lindgren over in the marketplace. And what we do is we publicly advertise plans and specifications. So we put them out there and we don't send them to, 10 different contractors. We put it out there and we let whoever wants to bid it. So we had 6 bidders on that project. And that's anything over 3 is usually a pretty good cross section of bidders.
And in that case, David, that all the bidders were within pretty close to each other for the numbers. So.
Yes.
The other projects that were
Well, I've been 29 years of doing this. I think only once have I had a project where we didn't have a bidder. Contractors are, my experience is they bid everything. And if everybody's busy and the schedule is tight, that pricing's going up. If everybody's hungry, meaning they don't have any work, we're going to get very aggressive bids. It's also been my experience is if this project moves forward, we want to have these plans complete in December sometime. The benefit to that is then we get some very aggressive pricing. People looking for work for 24, they don't have anything on the books. It's good to have your plans out early so you get some aggressive bidding. If you bid it this time of year, there's a lot of contractors already have work for a good part of the year already. So timing is key to a good project delivery.
Did you give a reason why Proctor and Motor got state funding for Hermantown?
Oh, for the question is about local government aid and why they get that funding. I'm going to do the short version of a super complex equation that the state uses to determine that. But one of the heaviest equations in that and one of the biggest factors on what the state recognizes as need is the age of housing stock. And so one of the advantages of being in Hermantown is we have a lot of, young infrastructure, younger houses, things that are kind of pretty solid. And that tends to hurt us when they do that equation. The change that we're hoping comes that opens that up is kind of changing some of the weights of things like population, age of infrastructure, dialing back the importance of age and housing stock. If you're me and you're really into this stuff, it's super fascinating and it's kind of interesting. It's being led by Representative Liz Lagarde up on the range to be able to open that up. And we're probably one of about 80 cities in Minnesota that doesn't receive local government aid at this point. And I think that this piece of legislation would put, I think it even dollar for dollar, it might open it up to all 80. Some of those dollar amounts might be pretty small, but the challenge is that we're a little bit, yes, but we're a little bit unique in terms of how we're situated, how our tax base works, how most of the houses in our community aren't as old as the rural pieces, are kind of fresh and new compared to our neighbors like Proctor, like Duluth, like Floodwood, all kinds of stuff like that. So in some ways, local government aid has always kind of basically been a catch-all for cities that can't do any basic projects that can't happen. Now the state is starting to think of local government aid differently as something that can support whatever is maybe the next best step that a community needs. It'll change those dollar amounts. For example, how much, like, I'm going to be wrong here. It's either 33 or 66%. So don't hold me to it, but a significant portion of Duluth's annual budget is local government aid, whereas 0% of ours is local government aid. So that changes how we can operate as an organization and as a city. So any freeing up of some of that funding would be a pretty big boon to Hermantown. But we've operated without any local government aid or any real meaningful dollar amount for probably about a decade, maybe give or take a few years. Yeah. Well, no, and local government aid can be used in a lot of different ways. So it could go to this project. It could go to hire more police officers. It could go to parks. It could go to the hybrid version of the fire department works, all of that. For whatever it's worth, I'll get out in front of that question though. But it would not likely change the individual assessments, whether it was on this or not, because of the, yeah. Another question in the back. These are great questions, by the way, you guys. Yeah, so the question is broadband access and grants around that. So currently we do not have a grant anywhere in Hermantown. The most recent grant, Mediacom called it the Field of Dreams grant, kind of was up Midway, Rose Road, ended up being about 275 plus addresses impacted by that. So Hermantown does not have another grant coming, period. There is thoughts that Mediacom may spill into an underrepresented part of Hermantown that might be this neck of the woods with a different project, but that isn't certain yet. But that wouldn't be run by Hermantown at this point. That may factor in with, when we're doing this project or not, but the impact of those types of utility digs are pretty minor when it comes. We didn't have to slow down or close anything when they came in and did that kind of chunk of the city over there. So, but there is at least reason to be a little bit optimistic about accessibility in that kind of quadrant of town. And we're totally happy to take credit if it works out that way. It's totally the city that made that happen. Other questions? These are really good questions. We made it all the way through. Yeah. And again, a lot of the best parts of this, the goal today not only is kind of what we've outlined there, but is to start really making the connection so that you know who you're working with. So as you have questions that'll come after today or 10 minutes after you walk out the door or over the next several months that, you know, you can reach out to me, David. Both of our contact information is on that road's website. Again, all this information will be updated there. Any kind of processes and stuff that are significant, you're going to see another mailing from me. As we get closer to 2024, you'll see that. If you want a taste of how these weekly meetings work, David and I are going to live on Ungstad Road all summer. You'll be able to see on that same page those updates, so you can kind of get a feel for what that's like on a project of that level of significance. But yeah, reach out and ask whenever. Jonathan. The next official meeting on this will either be the second, let me back up, the second in April, which I believe is the 17th, or the 1st of May. If that changes, the best way you'll do that, because I won't mail out 111 letters about that, is Wednesday before the Monday, we'll post the agenda and you'll see it on that. That is specifically what Jason said in the Star, correct? That was definitely in the Star. It may not be on the 17th. It might be in the first meeting in May. But as the community engagement guy, you should come every first and third Monday. I mean, it's amazing what happens. Or log in. It's stuff like this all the time. But at least for that degree, I just want to be clear. There's certain things I definitely will invite you for, but that next step in that public hearing, you'll see in the Star, or the very best spot, other than hollering at me, is hermantownmn.com/agenda. You can see all of the city agendas, and those, with a few exceptions, post the Wednesday before the Monday, but definitely by Thursday or Friday in a worst case scenario.
Once you fix a road home, valuation.
I do not. I don't, but I do know that there are folks who, you know, when it comes to things like trails and roads, have leveraged our work to turn around and sell their house, and we've never had anybody complain. Yeah. 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 We won't tell anybody we've built this road, just you guys. I can't speak to that right now. No, right off the top of my head. So I had been hired at the city. They created my position, and that was like the first big story that the news wanted to cover with the new guy was, so you have some vandals out on Hermantown Road, and I was like, So I'm again I will tell no one, but I'd love to know who did it because it was great. Yeah, go ahead.
For water and sewer? Yeah. So it's been boy, I can't. So the question is, what are we seeing the average assessments for water and sewer? And over my career here at the city, the breaking point where I've seen the project either be a success or fail is about $20,000 per parcel per utility. So if you were to petition and say, I want water and sewer, it would be 20,000 for water, 20,000 for sewer. That would be and part of that, and that's still just a fraction of the cost. That's not the entire cost. But if you look at what is a new mound system, you know, you're probably 20 to 25,000. Drilling a well is probably 15 at the minimum. So it's in that ballpark. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So another thing I want to share with the group here is, as we look forward to the next series of meetings, the next meeting will be the public hearing, and that's where you voice your opinion, whether you're in favor of the project or against it, and the council then will direct me as a city engineer to proceed with the project. So that's kind of the next step. Then after that, we'll get into the design, and when we get into the design, that's when we'll be answering questions about, you know, how is my driveway gonna look like? Do I need to, are we cutting the hill down? How is the ditch gonna look like? Those specifics. So I would recommend, you know, reserve that stuff until we have a real project, until the city council orders a project. And like I said, we will have once we complete the 30% plans, we will have another, I'm not sure if it's gonna be a public hearing or
Public info.
so we'll have another informal meeting like this where we have 30% plans. We'll go through our findings and our recommendations, and then we'll answer individual questions. And things we need to know as we, one of the big things out here would be if there's any drainage problems. I got water ponding in my ditch in my front yard, or I got a sump pump that discharges and we got to make sure the ditch picks it up. Stuff like that we need to be aware of as we're designing it.